No, but, a lot of people ask me about that and say, what's the secret of Mrs. Brown? And I don't know if there is any secret about Mrs. Brown. She's a bitch.
What if one of the most outrageous families in British television wasn't as united behind the scenes as the world believed? From the moment Mrs. Brown's Boys exploded onto BBC One in 2011, it carried the energy of a runaway train, fast, chaotic, loud, and unapologetically messy. Fans adored it for the very same reasons critics dismissed it. But while the laughter on screen looked effortless, the reality behind the camera was far more complicated. Brendan O'Carroll built the show like a real-life fortress, stacking it with family members, childhood friends, and people he trusted deeply. That tight-knit bond became the show's greatest strength, but also the source of its deepest fractures. As the series became a phenomenon, the friendly gig from the stage days transformed into a global machine with relentless schedules, higher expectations, and pressure that crept quietly into everyone's lives. Cast members who once felt protected by the comfort of familiarity began feeling boxed in by it. Rumblings of tension, whispers of favoritism, and the strain of mixing personal relationships with professional obligations slowly cracked the foundation. And while viewers continued laughing at Agnes Brown's antics, they had no idea that several beloved actors were inching toward the exit door, some with heavy hearts, others with frustration bubbling beneath the surface. But to truly understand how the chaos began, we have to rewind to the unlikely beginning of the entire Brown empire. Long before Mrs. Brown became a household name, she was just a comedic idea floating around the head of a struggling Irish performer in the early 1990s. Brendan O'Carroll never intended to play Agnes himself. In fact, the role was originally meant for an actress who simply didn't show up one night. With the audience already waiting and panic swirling backstage, Brendan grabbed a wig, stepped into a dress, and walked on stage out of pure necessity. That improvised moment, chaotic, unexpected, and drenched in adrenaline, became the spark that launched a phenomenon. The early stage shows were beautifully disorderly. Cues were missed, props failed, jokes landed sideways, and Brendan would often break character just to tease the audience. But that rawness was exactly what people loved. Irish and British working-class families connected instantly to the loud, imperfect warmth of Agnes, who reminded them of the aunties and mammies they grew up with. 2 decades later, the BBC took a gamble and brought it to television. Critics groaned, viewers cheered, and within weeks, Mrs. Brown's Boys became the comedy version of Marmite, loved passionately or dismissed entirely. But underneath the laughter, the show carried something far more fragile than anyone realized. It wasn't just a sitcom. It was a family business built on real identities, real relationships, and real emotions. And as history has proven, even the strongest family bonds can bend under the weight of fame. That pressure would eventually push the first major domino. When the cameras started rolling for the BBC version, audiences quickly picked up on something unusual. Most of the cast shared the same last name. Brendan O'Carroll wasn't just the lead actor. He was the general, the architect, and the father figure who assembled a cast of family members and close friends. His wife, children, sister, and in-laws filled key roles. And for a while, this closeness added genuine warmth to the show. The chemistry was undeniable because the bonds were real. But there's a fine line between family and workplace, and Mrs. Brown's Boys walked it every day. The joke that the show was run like a family shop became less funny when the consequences of a real family business started appearing. Some cast members felt overshadowed. Others struggled with the dual identity of employee and relative. There were whispers of disagreements, quiet tensions that never made it to the tabloids, and a growing sense that the show's explosive success had transformed a humble family project into a fast-moving machine that no one could control. It wasn't malice, it was pressure. The kind that slowly builds until someone finally decides they can't breathe anymore. And the first person to reach that point was someone viewers never expected, Brendan's own daughter. Her departure wasn't loud or dramatic, but it signaled that the Brown empire was about to shift in a way no one could ignore. Fiona O'Carroll wasn't just another actor on the set, she was part of the show's DNA. As Maria Brown, she represented the voice of reason in a whirlwind of madness, grounding scenes with subtle reactions, and a steady presence audiences grew genuinely attached to. But her real journey with Mrs. Brown's Boys began years before the TV cameras. She had lived through the chaotic stage shows, the endless tour, and the intense family dynamics that shaped the entire Brown universe. So when she suddenly announced in 2022 that she wouldn't return for the live tour, fans were blindsided. The truth, however, was softer and more human than expected. Fiona confessed she felt like she had spent years breathing life into someone else's story while forgetting her own. At over 40, a mother and a woman navigating her own path, she realized she needed a life separate from her father's character, from the family brand, and from the expectations that shadowed her. Despite whispers of family drama, she and Brendan insisted there was no tension. And if anything, Brendan's support revealed how close they really were. But Fiona's exit left a hole the show couldn't easily fill. Maria had been the calm center, the emotional counterweight to Agnes's chaotic energy. Without her, the tone tilted toward even more outrageous humor, leaving longtime fans feeling something essential had quietly slipped away. Fiona's decision marked more than a personal choice. It was the first public sign that the cast's inner balance was beginning to shift, and the next departure would be anything but quiet. If Fiona's departure was a whisper, Gary Hollywood's was an explosion. For nearly a decade, Gary played Dino Doyle, the flamboyant, razor-witted hairdresser whose comedic timing and chemistry with Rory became essential to the show's rhythm. So when he vanished in 2020's holiday specials with no explanation, fans scrambled for answers. And then the truth came out. Gary claimed he was earning significantly less than other cast members for the same work. Feeling blindsided and undervalued, he confronted the production. What followed was a fallout so severe it ended in legal action, accusations, and headlines that ripped apart the image of the show as one big loving family. Gary believed he was dismissed for speaking up. Brendan denied this, calling it a misunderstanding. But by then, the damage was done. Fans took sides. The press circled like sharks, and the once untouchable Brown brand suddenly felt vulnerable. Dino's absence left a hole you could feel through the screen. His sharp humor, camp flair, and dynamic chemistry were irreplaceable. And for many viewers, Gary's exit revealed something deeper. Success had turned the once humble production into a tight corporate structure where not everyone felt equally valued. And as tensions rose publicly, another departure was quietly brewing, one built not on money but on heartbreak. Rory Cowan's exit in 2017 didn't come with lawsuits or controversies. It came with grief. Rory had been Brendan's publicist long before stepping into the heels of Rory Brown, a character who quickly became one of the show's brightest stars. His charm, flamboyance, and gentle warmth gave viewers a character they genuinely adored. But behind the smiles, Rory was struggling. His mother was ill, and he had been caring for her while juggling the grueling touring schedule. By the time she passed away, his emotional reserves were empty. He admitted he was on stage pretending to be happy when he felt the opposite. And so he made a heartbreaking decision. He left the show he helped build. Fans were devastated. Recasting him proved nearly impossible. His personality wasn't an act. It was authentic, irreplaceable. The new actor, Damien McKiernan, faced an uphill battle from the moment he stepped into the role. But for Rory, leaving wasn't betrayal, it was survival. His departure revealed a truth that fame often hides. No matter how successful a show becomes, the people inside it are still human. But as one emotional chapter closed, another behind-the-scenes shift quietly reshaped the show's dynamic yet again. As fans continued watching for hilarity and chaos, many noticed something odd. Kathy Brown, played by Jennifer Gibney, began quietly disappearing. Scenes shortened, appearances reduced, and her emotional presence, the grounded, sensible daughter, started fading from the show. Rumors swirled. Was there tension between Brendan and Jennifer? Were they having creative disagreements? In truth, the real story was far more ordinary and far more revealing. Jennifer and Brendan mutually felt Kathy's storyline had reached its natural end. Kathy had been the straight character, the grounding force, the rational voice among a crowd of eccentrics. But as the seasons went on, Brendan pushed the series toward even more slapstick and more outrageous humor. That shift didn't leave much room for the quieter, emotional characters. Rather than forcing Kathy into the spotlight when her arc had run dry, Brendan and Jennifer agreed it was best to step her back. Yet her absence created a new problem. Without grounding characters like Kathy and Maria, the show leaned harder into absurdity, losing some of the emotional complexity that once balanced the comedy. Fans felt the tonal shift instantly, and that shift would become even more noticeable when the show faced yet another departure, one tied directly to the pressures created by earlier exits. When Rory Cowan left, the show made a difficult decision: recast him. Damien McKiernan, a former Mr. Ireland, stepped into the role with courage and determination. But stepping into one of the most beloved characters on British TV is like walking into a room full of people already missing someone. Damien played Rory with a quieter tone, softer humor, and more understated presence. Some viewers warmed to him, but many felt the original magic was gone, not because Damien lacked talent, but because Rory Cowan's version had become iconic. Still, Damien showed up to every tour, every special, and every scene with professionalism. But by 2020, whispers spread. Damien had disappeared from promotional materials. Rumors tied his absence to the same pay dispute that consumed Gary Hollywood's exit. Brendan denied it, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But just like Dino, Damien vanished without closure. Recasting doesn't just replace a character, it rewires the emotional rhythm of a show. And each exit weakened the connection that made the early seasons so loved. With every missing face, fans felt a familiar question forming. Had Mrs. Brown's Boys slowly lost the heart that once made it special? As the cast changes piled up, the tone of Mrs. Brown's Boys shifted in ways viewers could feel but rarely articulate. Early seasons carried a balance, chaos wrapped in warmth, slapstick wrapped in heart. But with major emotional anchors gone, the show leaned more heavily on outrageous gags, fourth-wall jokes, and shock humor. Critics began calling it a time capsule comedy, suggesting it was stuck in an era long gone. Fans were divided. Some still adored Agnes's antics, while others admitted the newer episodes lacked the emotional layers that once grounded the madness. And yet the series continued. Christmas specials still drew millions. Loyal fans kept showing up. But the spark felt different, not extinguished, just changed. What had once been a family circus now felt like a show trying to recreate a feeling built on cast chemistry that no longer existed. Yet despite the shifts, the legacy remained undeniable. And that brings us to the final truth, the part that explains why the laughter, despite everything, still matters. Through all the highs and lows, Mrs. Brown's Boys remains one of the most unforgettable comedies the UK and Ireland have ever produced. It may no longer look or feel exactly like the show that debuted in 2011, but its legacy is stitched into the memories of millions. Fiona's emotional evolution, Gary's explosive exit, Rory's heartbreaking departure, Jennifer's quiet retreat, and Damien's uphill battle all shaped the show in ways most viewers never realized. Yet here's the truth. No cast stays the same forever. People grow, people change, and sometimes walking away is an act of love, for oneself or for the art they once helped create. Mrs. Brown's Boys may have lost pieces of its original magic, but it still stands as a testament to the messy, unpredictable, beautifully imperfect world Brendan O'Carroll created with a single wig and a last-minute decision. And maybe that's the real joke the show has always played, not on the audience, but on life itself. Because even behind the loudest laughter, there's always something deeper waiting to be revealed.